I think they
All
genuinely
right,
miss it.
we are going to call this meeting of the Technical
I'll give them
Advisory
the
Committee to order.
fighting
It is
issue.
2:32
Ended up
p.m.
pissing off the board. Smacked them.
Make that point.
Smacked.
Roll call. Mr. Lindenboom?
Present.
Mr. Rudolph?
Here.
Mr. Hanson?
Here.
Mr. Alini?
Present.
I know. Sorry,
Present.
Todd. Mr. Young, I know yours. Ms. Formula is here. Back. We do have a quorum. Greg, can you make our public
Sure.
announcements?
All AMATS meetings are open to the public. The public is invited to comment. If we have a business item, we'll have a presentation by staff or a consultant. The committee will then be given a chance to discuss that, and after that, the public will be invited to testify. Comment.
So first up is approval of the agenda.
Move to approve. Second.
Moved by Mr. Van Hoen, seconded by Mr. Lindenboom. Are there any objections? All right, the agenda is approved. We do have a set of meeting minutes in front of us from the September meeting.
Move to approve.
Moved by Mr. Lindenboom, seconded by Mr. Van Hoen. Are there any objections? Those meeting minutes are approved. So moving right on, we're on our first action item of the week, which is the Unified Planning Work Program, the UPWP 2019 budget.
Okay, so just a reminder for folks, this is one of the 4 major plans that we need to do. This is our work program. It shows what staff is going to do for the next, in this case, the next year. Our work program is a 2-year program, but we budget annually because we have to wait to find out what Congress does with the allocation and so forth. So we did get an allocation amount from DOT, and so we have the budget before you. I will say that when we originally posted the budget, the one that was originally posted online, we were still waiting on our allocation, so we just kind of had to wing it. So we used last year's numbers for the allocation. We since have received the correct allocation, so the paper that you have before you, this is the correct allocation. Is it also the one on the iPad there?
Yeah, so the one on the iPad has the correct allocation, it's just how it was broken out per task item was not updated.
Right,
before.
so the correct dollar figure is there, but this is, when we first put it up there, we hadn't quite figured out exactly which task we were going to be working on. In other words, we knew that we had a tip that was going to be done this year, so we wouldn't have as much time in it next year, but we still had that old kind of breakdown. So the funds that are shown, the distribution that's shown on the paper is the correct one that we're asking you to bless and send to the policy committee. Just another reminder, for the budget, all we need to do for the budget is approve it by the policy committee. It doesn't require 30-day public review. It doesn't have to go to the assembly. It just needs blessing by the recommendation from the TAC and up to the policy committee. The main changes in the budget from 18 to 19 is that we will have less to do on the tip because we will have an approved tip. We still have a little decent amount to do on the tip because, as you know, the policy committee asked, once this tip is approved, to start the process of looking at our criteria and revamping them. So there still will be a lot of effort spent on that, not as much as 2018. We will have a lot more time spent on the street typology. That is something that was in the existing work program. We were originally hoping to get more done on that in 2018, but it got pushed off to 19. We won't have as much time spent on either the non-motorized update or Spenard Road corridor study because both of those should be finishing up very soon, and it'll just be a little care and feeding for the approval process. I think those are the main changes that we're looking at. In addition, we had a lot of money last year in the coordinated transportation plan, and that project is nearing its end, and it's being managed by the Public Transportation Department, so There's a little bit of funding in there for engineering for AMAT staff, but that's about it. Happy to answer questions. This is, we're asking you to recommend it to the policy committee for approval in 2 weeks.
Any questions? Mr. Hendrick?
Just for my edification, where does the operating in-kind match come out of? Just is in the transit local matches?
So the operating income match is the data section of the traffic department. When they go out and lay hoses down on the ground to do traffic counts, we use those traffic counts to feed our model. So we have some federal funds that we use to support that task, some in the TIP and some in the PL, but they also do a lot of that effort with just their funds, whether it's property tax or municipal funds, I'm not sure. And that's how we capture that. We capture that to show our match. The transit, Art may build a head for that. I'm not exactly sure where that comes from.
Bus operators are most of the in-kind match, all the local funds.
Okay. We don't, it's not cash we do.
We do not write a check.
It's actually physical work.
It's physical
Yes.
work.
All right.
And we've done, I know we've done the operating match from day one since I've been here. So I imagine it's been going that way for quite a while.
It's a variety, I mean, it's vehicular volumes, it's fed bike volumes, anything that's needed to, help support the program. Timing, travel time surveys, everything, the different ones that go within the MPP, support, so.
It's always a concern, especially for me, where the match comes from.
Yeah, and fortunately, in this case, we don't have to write a check. It's capturing it.
Yeah.
We've done some planning projects in the TIP and the PL, doing that in-kind match, and it gets pretty challenging. This one is just absolutely down to a science, and the traffic group that's been going so long.
Fair enough, thanks.
We're doing it this one.
Mr. Rudolph?
We submitted some text edits. Is the text part going to be doing?
Yeah, so the text edits, we kind of need to look at a little bit more. There really isn't anything that speaks to text edits in the public participation plan. So I just want to look at it a little more to make sure that doesn't require some public review. We'll get it done really quickly. I just want to confirm that so that we're following our policies and procedures and the operating agreement. But, so we won't be doing that here, but we will be doing that very soon. I just couldn't determine that right away. I didn't want to run afoul of anything.
Any other questions from the committee? And I will open it to public comment at this time. Are there any comments or questions on the UPWP 2019 budget? Going once, going twice? Okay. The matter lies with committee.
Move forward to the policy.
Moved by Mr. Hanson, seconded by Mr. Lee. Are there any objections? No? All right. Then we're so moved. All right, next item before us are the Citizens Advisory Committee appointments, CDC appointments.
We have 2 appointments to the Citizen Advisory Committee. One is our President Zoning Commission rep, and the other one is our District 2 rep, which is Chugakica River. So you have your resumes before you on paper, and we're asking for you to recommend those to the policy committee to approve. You don't have those?
No?
There's some back there.
Yeah, there should be a staff member.
They were posted, weren't they?
On their resumes, I didn't have them at the time of
So
posting.
you have a quick bio in
I read the bio.
in the memo.
That's it, yeah.
It's a condensed.
And Mr. Looney is here, and I'm sure he would do a song and dance for like 5 minutes while he was passing out.
I don't think so.
Well, you can ask him questions. You can say something.
I will stand just for introduction and for the people who don't know me, but as my resume is there, as trans. Essentially, I'm a long-time local resident, born and raised here. I'm civil engineer, business owner with CRW Engineering. Although when I first actually was even be approached to be on the PCC, I was worried about conflict of interest with the Planning and Zoning Commission. That as a business owner, there's really very few places where we're directly related to a planning case for Planning and Zoning Commission. We don't do that much pure planning or rezones kind of thing. So I've been able to apply my background and knowledge both with the engineering profession as well as the local area and my interest in trails and bikes and things like that to the cases. So I hope we'll do that same value here. See how it goes.
Thank you, Brian.
Okay?
I'm gonna guess Matt's not here?
No,
Or
Matt is
are you?
here.
Great.
Yes.
You want to do a quick introduction?
Sure. My name's Matt Cruikshank. Born and raised out in Birchwood. I'm a very active member of Birchwood. I don't have quite the resume of our previous person here.
I mean, might not.
I'm on the right track.
Come on, Brian.
I'm an officer with the Birchwood Community Council. I'm also the FCC rep. I'm an officer with Local 71, and I really was trying to get more representation with Chugach River area. It seems like a lot of the projects don't include Chugach River, and that's a prime goal of mine.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Anybody have any questions for either one of the nominees? I think that's a good question.
What was that?
Who are they replacing?
John Spring was our P and Z rep, and he's rotating off planning and zoning, so, and we'll go Oregon. And, boy, I'm trying to remember who we had. I think it was Miranda Walso, who was
Yes.
the Chugach River rep, and she stepped off a little while ago. And so,
Great. Any other questions for either one of the nominees? Recommendations? Appointments? Well, thank you for coming. I appreciate it. I guess if there's no questions from the committee, are there any questions or comments from the public that they have on either one of these appointments? So I guess my follow-up question, the Citizens Advisory Committee, do they meet on an as-needed basis, or do they have regular meetings?
we have quarterly meetings,
Okay.
and as needed if we have something that
A
pops up.
special project?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, gentlemen, both for attending. I know it takes a little bit of time to be here, so we appreciate it. To me, I find that heartening, because sometimes having them show up to their own Citizens Advisory Committee, I know sometimes boards and committees, we have a hard time having folks show up. As you can see, we don't even have a full board up here right now. So I appreciate you showing up for this, and I hope that you are ready and willing to participate with our Citizens Advisory Committee. So, with that, the matter lies with the committee.
Move to forward the Citizen Advisory Committee appointments to the AMEX Policy Committee for approval.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Danto, seconded by Mr. Lindenmood. Are there any objections?
I'm not going, I've just known Brian too long, but I won't this time.
Well, no objections, we are so moved. Thank you. All right, the next item before us is the Complete Streets Policy, 5C.
Joni, our senior planner, will jump in.
All right. Okay, so not a whole lot to look at today. It's been a little bit, we kind of got behind with all the other things that were in front of you, but the last that you saw, we had a work session on the checklist portion of the policy. The policy and all the comments have already been through the committee. All of the comments that were approved and were moved forward to the policy committee. They've agreed on what they want to accept or negate. All of everything from the comments that was approved, anything that was added or subtracted, added or deleted from the policy are shown in red on your copy here. So anything that's a change is in red. And again, you're not approving that today except for one little piece, but just to make it easier to see, I think the policy committee had requested that we revise the document to show clearly what was being changed. Anyway, so anything that was added is red and underlined. Anything that was deleted is red and there's a strike through on it. So it should be pretty easy to go through and see what's changed. The only thing that you're approving today is on page 5, and it's part of section 5, scope of complete streets policy, and it is the fourth bullet down on page 5. And if you can see there, it's a strike through. It says, a project's compliance with the policy shall be determined based on the filing of the complete streets/green roads checklist form. And so at the work session, the committee decided to checklist wasn't appropriate for the policy. We're going to try to put that in someplace else, maybe in the design of the project they were on. So all you're doing is approving that we're striking that. And basically, that's the only place the checklist is listed in the policy. So is that pretty clear, or just need more explanation? Okay. Great. Yeah. Any questions or?
Any questions or comments from the committee?
Can you tell me real quick on the multimodal level of service, what's the definition of that? Who defined that standard?
What are you referring to in the policy?
Section 9 under performance measures, you list multimodal level of service. First bullet. As in, performance indicators that contribute to complete streets goals include.
Multimodal service.
Yeah. So we're
Yes.
not aware of an accepted definition of that, or an agency that has given an accepted definition.
Right.
So I'm wondering.
Do we have one? As far as I know, we don't have one. It does say that performance indicators that contribute blah, 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 include but are not limited to. So I don't know if, we're just listing out potential performance measures. I'm not sure that we're saying we have to use that, but maybe that could use some rewording if we don't even have a performance.
Well, the concern is there really isn't an accepted definition of that particular, and that's just one of many. And we're trying to try to create a document that's not so ambiguous that it can't be applied
Right.
and implemented. From the department's perspective, we don't have an issue with this moving forward as it sits today. But it's really kind of a toothless policy for all practical matters. There's a lot in the back of it. There's a lot of we encourage people to use this. We encourage people to incorporate it.
Right.
But when we have definitions that really we don't really have a national agreement on what they need or how to apply them, it makes it difficult for the department to implement those as part of our project development process.
I absolutely agree. I think that what might be nice to see from our perspective is if we don't have a current definition of multimodal level of service, can we work on developing one in the future sometime? Because I think it would be nice for folks to have a better idea of when we're looking at level of service. How are we measuring everything, not just vehicles? So I don't know if that's consider striking that from this policy. I mean, again, the policy committee would have to make the final recommendation to do that here, but that's something that they might want to do. And that makes sense to me. I mean, I kind of agree that without the checklist, it's sort of a useless policy, but we developed it with the intent of we were trying to encourage. We're not using shalls. We did that with keeping the agencies in mind. We're not trying to tell people what to do, but so I don't know. It's sort of like we win if we're too strict. It's not okay, or if we're not strict enough, it's not okay. So I don't know what the happening ground there is.
Well, I guess I worry as much about expectation management as members of the public see a policy. There's an expectation that there's no implementation of that policy amongst all the transportation organizations in the community. And when we stumble on things that aren't defined or not created yet, or we don't have checklists, for instance, that can be followed, we set an expectation in the public's mind, and then we turn right around and say, yeah, but there's really no teeth in this thing. So, again, the Department of Transportation doesn't have an issue with this moving forward, but I want to make sure that we're sensitive to the expectation management of the public. And when we are executing capital improvement projects and what they expect to happen, what they think should happen versus what doesn't.
Right. Well, that, yeah, and
So-
I understand what you're saying.
Noted for the record as yes.
Sure, of course, and like I said, the policy committee can take that up too.
Well, that's a difficult thing. It's an industry-wide discussion right now anyways, as it relates to multimodal and how you measure, because it is relatively easy to measure what the average level of services is for a vehicular operation, but even that's not 100% accurate or really understood by the general public either. At least I'll have that discussion, because when you look at what an average delay for an intersection is, and it says this many seconds, people are like, well, I don't wait that long, and it's like, well, it's an average for everybody who's approaching the intersection, which means some people may wait 90, some people will pull up right as the queue is moving, and they don't have to stop at all, so there's a zero, even though it's an average. So I think this is it's saying an indicator can include, I mean, multimodal level of service, and I think it's something that the industry right now is moving towards actually quantifying and having a number for, so that it can be evaluated. And FHWA actually is trying to move towards that too. So, Aaron?
I just want to kind of mention that I know it's been a while. The congestion management process that was done back in 2015, 2016 actually made an indication to move towards a multimodal level of service as future needs. So it's been identified as a desire of AMATS to move in that direction. And part of one of the projects in the TIP is the TISMO, transportation, whatever it is. It's basically going to be taking the CMP and ITS and merging them into an implementation plan. And so it might be during that it looks at how to do a multimodal level of service, or how to start collecting the data, or are we collecting it, what's needed, and move towards that direction.
Cool. Thank you. Any other questions? Mr. Rudolph?
On page 5, I think the new bullet, the second bullet down, the first red one, it says projects that clearly follow Complete Streets guidelines will receive full points in the TIP scoring criteria. What are the Complete Streets guidelines? Because I don't see a section here that says guidelines. As someone who sometimes scores TIP projects, how will I know they get full points or not?
Well, so the guidelines, they're in the TIP, so we're going to be reworking TIP.
So, in the
Just
TIP.
refer
though.
to in the
Okay.
TIP, the guidelines in the TIP for if the project is adhering to Complete Streets.
So the TIP scoring criteria will have whether or not it conforms to Complete Streets or not.
We'll have a Complete Streets category, yes.
Well, no, I think what Bart is asking, I get that it was like the TIP's gonna have a scoring category that says complete streets, but it says projects that clearly follow the complete street guidelines. Do you mean this policy or design?
So I think it's referring to I'm pretty sure that is referring to Complete Streets criteria in the TIP. So there will be a Complete Streets criteria, because I don't even think this policy has guidelines. It doesn't have a guidelines section.
So the TIP scoring criteria would have to say, like, you get 1 point if you only do this, 2 points if you only do this, principles, right? Is that what you're alluding to?
And I don't, since we haven't even started drafting the new TIP criteria, I have no idea what that's going to say, but the point was we would get it into the TIP criteria as an element on board. So maybe that could be reworded, say projects that clearly follow the Complete Streets criteria and the TIP would receive full points or something. I mean, maybe it's just worded poorly.
Yeah, this is probably the only place where this policy would have teeth, is whether or not a project gets into the TIP and it's scoped to have Complete Streets principles in it. So I just want to make sure that it's clear.
So that was part of the big discussion with the checklist, that we went over the session, and that was, like other places like Fairbanks, they do theirs at the front end, they only have a few projects, so they do a complete walkthrough, checklist, everything. For projects that are adhering to Complete Streets, and then same is mostly for the public, since I know you all were at that work session. So, but basically Fairbanks has a checklist, they only have a few projects to look at. They don't receive as much funding as we do. So at the beginning, they do an actual walkthrough project, they check off the elements that are adhering to Complete Streets, and then they take that information back and use it to decide whether or not they're going to fund the project. So that's a very strong complete streets element that guides their projects and how they're funded, it's too labor intensive for us to do that since we have so many projects that get nominated. So the question is whether or not to give the policy some teeth, does it make sense to have that at the front end or when the project is actually in design? And so it was decided that that might be something that's more useful to have when the project gets to design, and so the project managers can just indicate how they're following complete streets, what plans are they looking at, what are their, what the traffic, or the traffic counts are, and all those type of things. So, just walked myself into a rabbit hole now. What was the original question? I'm sorry, I'm like,
No, I think you answered it.
Okay.
Leaving it more to the designers to incorporate the principles after the funding's already been given to the project.
right, and I know it's not ideal, but we are in kind of a bind because it's just not practical for us to do a checklist before. And a lot of the stuff at the front end we don't have information on until it gets to that 35% design. So. And, you know, we could try it for a while, see if it works. If it's not working, then let's amend the policy. Just doing that. So, your question?
It is, yeah.
I actually have a comment that as I was looking through this, looking at it, just to make sure. In the table of contents, section 7 was actually changed to design guidance and not standards. And then we actually added a section 11 references as well. So just make sure that your table of contents at the beginning is updated to kind of reflect the addition and the modification there.
Okay, thank you for pointing that out. So sorry, first, the design guidance, section 7 in the table of contents.
Yeah,
And
and
then-
then there's actually, you now have 11 sections and not just 10. And section 11 is references. I believe it's, yeah.
Sorry,
references.
and the policy is, the policy should be correct, right? But just in the table of contents. and the
Yes.
that? Okay.
Yes,
Thank
just
you.
the table of contents. It's corrected, it was corrected. Yeah.
Okay, didn't catch that. Thank you very much.
Sorry, I was paying
No,
attention to
you're-
the red before.
you're almost
and then-
good with that.
and not. Are there any other questions or comments from the committee? Are there any questions or comments from the public? Yeah, please state your name for the record.
James Starzyk, S-T-A-R, Z as in zebra, E as in echo, C as in Charlie. Just to follow up on your section 7, you've gone from design standards to guidance, but in the text there, it still refers to standards in a number of places. Just wanted to point that out in case that wasn't intentional.
Oh, okay, thank you. So in the paragraph itself, replace those with guidance. Okay. James, I see 2 places.
Okay, let's get that. Yeah, I think it's just, Joni, I think it's like complete streets implementation relies on using the best and latest design standards. So I'm going to say design guidance to maximize design flexibility, and then design solutions are needed on engineering.
Okay, I got this.
AMAS promotes the adoption of national best practice design standard, we are beside design guidance for designing complete streets. And then I think that's, all the rest of them starts actually listing out a lot of the design guidance that's out there. I think it's just those 2 other places.
Just those 2 got, okay, I
Yeah.
got those 2 spots. Thank you.
Did you catch any other, James?
No.
Okay. State your name for the record.
Ryan, actually, I intended just to listen, not to say anything, but I did not pick up the actual policy written, but on the discussion regarding whether it's I guess, a tool to set the goals early on versus near the very end, look back and do a checklist to see, did I meet these goals? As a designer who carries projects just like PMD does, like from the start planning all the way through the detailed design, boy, it's so important to set the goals early on and establish those things. Because the amount of effort and money and schedule it takes to look back and say, wow, I missed this one goal, it's way too late. So I'd almost encourage that it be done as early as possible, maybe during the decisional document stage or something like that, where that's really supposed to be 35% design, and maybe that's the intent, I don't know. But,
What did you call that? Which stage?
the decisional document, so when we do projects, we do 35% or even less than that. We actually go to planning and zoning with this document, just big concepts. Biggest thing is that's where you go in, and here's the goals. You don't even have always a solution of what the thing's going to look like yet. Here's the goal, here's some potential alternatives, and here's how we hope to solve them. Kind of thing. And that's a good example is what's going in front of the Planning and Zoning Commission on Monday, 3rd Avenue, downtown by Brother Francis Shelter. It's just a 1,300-foot long piece of road that you're doing in-house. And one of the questions would be, wow, that it needs pedestrian improvements really bad. We all know how much pedestrian traffic's down there. It needs to be able to handle the vehicular traffic. It's arterial. But how much do we need to take care of bicyclists? Is a good question. I mean, I wonder that when I look at the case. I hear him talking about the case, but I should not be doing that. Bottom line is, if you set those goals early on and establish what the project goal is, and then iron it out, you have a big discussion and figure out, okay, bikes are lower priority than peds, but to come back after design is done, detailed design, it's just a waste of money kind of thing. So you have to establish those goals early on, 35% or less, and not have to come back. If you look in the hindsight mirror and say, well, I didn't hit that one goal, the bikes were never taken care of, that's expensive. I think so earlier the better.
The intent is at the design study report, before it, when we submit it to P&Z, not later on in the design.
Okay, so I misinterpreted that. So yeah, so right, that's about the 35% or less.
Right.
Like the decisional document mode kind of thing, where you're just throwing out this.
Not the decisional document. Wrong terminology.
Okay.
That's when we do eminent domain.
Oh, okay.
Concept report.
Concept report, I'm sorry,
Yes.
concept report, I got that, I'm sorry, mixed up.
Yeah.
Concept thing where just ambiguous numbers, things at that point.
I agree.
Yeah.
Well, if you read under the Complete Streets policy, the project clearly follows Complete Streets guidelines. Projects that clearly follow Complete Street guidelines will receive full points in the TIP scoring. So that should infer that there's a look right before it's even put in the TIP about whether it meets Complete Streets policy. So that's well before the consultant grabs it and starts designing it, or anybody starts scoping it, or anything.
Yeah, I agree.
It's already in the process. Hopefully that should give you some confidence.
Okay.
And then.
And we agree that's been part of the discussion on all the work sessions, is that it has to, these components of these projects have to be considered from day one as part of the project. I mean, really, they do. And sometimes there are reasons why, their primary use is the roadway, and whether it's a freight corridor or whether it's not in the decisions, but that those have to be considered from the very beginning. And I think one area, and I'm completely okay admitting this, I think one place where I feel that we as a municipality and the state fail sometimes is to document the conversations and the analysis that occurred, so that when 10 years later, 5 years later, or even like, I've had projects that in my career, 7.5 years that I've been in the municipality, I'm the only person that's left of the conversation that was happening about a certain project, so I'm the only one that remembers the conversation that happened.
How we got there.
So just documentation is a big part of it, so.
Documentation and reasons.
Yeah, exactly, rationale. Anyone else? The matter lies with committee.
Move to forward the Complete Streets policy to the AMAX Policy Committee for approval with the recommendations and suggestions made during this discussion.
By Mr. Van Code. Seconded by Mr. Levine.
And is it okay if I just make a clarifying? So when you say the changes to the table of contents, the changes to the standards, the guidance?
Yes.
Those changes?
Yes.
Okay, just making sure. Are there any objections? All right, no? Then we are so moved. Thank you. All right, the next item before us, we are on to the project plan and updates. So item 6A, the 2040 Metropolitan Transportation Plan update.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm Vivian Underwood for the record. We're having a work session with you all in a couple of weeks for the financial plan assumptions, and we'll be asking your approval of those assumptions in December. And the conversation that we've been having today about complete streets is very important for the MTP. And one of the main goals of the MTP is to integrate the land use plan more intentionally and more directly throughout the whole process. And one thing that what Aaron and I have been doing is, for each and every project that is going to be considered in the MTP so far, we've gone through and identified all of the adjacent land uses along the entire corridor, right, immediately adjacent. And that has been very instructive for us, actually. We went back to all the main policy areas of the land use plan map, the centers, the corridors, the facilities, the special land use areas. And we went and read about each one of those and pulled out the most important pieces for transportation. Almost all of them are really heavy on walkability, connectivity, and complete streets. And so for AMAS to be defining complete streets is absolutely necessary. And so the project descriptions in the MTP and the TIP then will give a heads up to the project manager that we're going to actually have a key or a legend that tells them what the land uses are that this project is going to need to address. It's not going to be easy, and we need the street typology to help the project managers. We found one project that was actually, it's 48th and Cordova. On that project alone, there is industrial land use, and there is residential and school. And so it's not like it's cookbook, right? We went to the OSNHP. We have an adopted street typology right now that has never been implemented. And I actually thought it was going to be more useful than it was. But the assumption, I suppose, is that along a whole corridor, there's going to be one street topology that applies to a whole long segment of a road, similar to the functional classification. So it was quite a surprise to realize that it doesn't help much at all. There's a lot of thinking that has to go into this. And also we want to overlay this with the freight corridors, the proposed freight corridors that are in the freight mobility plan, a study that have not been adopted yet, but it gives us a better idea. And it's basically the NHS with A and C streets thrown in. But we're going to overlay it with that and with the Vision Zero priority corridors. So we'll have a good picture of what we're looking at for these projects. Anyway, I just thought you might be interested to hear that.
I'm glad that 48th and Cordova is going to be a tough nut to crack, and we've recognized that for a while. It's kind of nice to hear that echoed when you're looking at all the land uses that are in there. And how, yes, we have industrial side by side with residential, with healthcare assisted, and with business, with school, and yeah, there's such a mix over there, and they all have kind of competing priorities sometimes. Figuring out what you can do best for the neighborhood, because it still is a neighborhood of sorts. So yeah, that one's. I'm glad I'm not the only one that's going, oh!
That's what so Joni's going to lead the street typology, and that's, it's going to have to be, I'm sure, an interagency team looking at that, because you'll have a corridor that is like a freight corridor, heavy use freight corridor, but that might go through a town center, and its primary users are pedestrians to address the land use plan, what it's calling for. So it's going to take a lot of give and take. Maybe segments of a certain corridor will be one thing, and along the corridor later on be something more different. It's going to be tough.
Next year.
Yeah.
So you said I know that you sent out the doodle poll about the work sessions with the financial assumptions. We'll be doing that soon, and that will be coming back before us in December, the meeting. Yes. Okay. Anything else for the MTP?
No, that's enough for now.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? questions from the public? Okay. Then, general information, all right, the TAC meeting Outlook updates.
Hi, everyone. Aaron. I just want to let you know that with the recent changeover of Jamie moving to a different position, and I've taken over some of the Outlook invites for the TAC and Policy Committee are a little wonky because they still show her name or there's duplicates. So I just wanted to give you guys a heads up. We're going to be deleting all of the TAC and Policy Committee meeting invites and resending them out under my name. And then kind of changing how some of them look or how some of them function. Like a good example is November, December, there are 2 meeting invites for the TAC and Policy Committee. So it's caused a little bit of confusion for some people. So we're going to work on cleaning that up. Just want to give you guys a heads up. The meetings are not canceled by doing that. We're just trying to make things look pretty on your calendars.
I was one of the ones, I shouldn't say I was the only one confused, but I just had to make sure that we had meetings today and not next week. I was like, no, it is today, it's not next week, so I'm open next week. Maybe we want to meet next week. Now open. All right. Are there any committee comments? Mr. Rudolph?
Election day is Tuesday, and the municipality is giving free bus rides to everyone all day long so that they have access to the polls. So ride the bus.
Really?
For free on Tuesday. Yep.
Have you put that out on social media?
We just put out a press release today, and
Okay.
everything's going out today. Yeah.
Okay. I haven't been online at all today, so I hadn't seen it because I'm like, hey, that's pretty cool. I will
Yeah.
share that
It's a
information.
big deal. Transportation is usually one of the biggest barriers to voting. So
Yes.
hopefully this will help.
Actually, having a conversation with somebody recently, talking about the history about why we actually have election day on Tuesdays. And it was fascinating to me, at least sounded like the theory. And if nobody knows, it's because generally Sunday was considered the Sabbath and you weren't supposed to travel on the Sabbath. And if you had to travel to get to the polls, you couldn't do it on Sunday, so you had to travel on Mondays, and they made it a Tuesday so that everybody could get to where they needed to go to vote. And so that's why it's Tuesdays, but also it sounds like a lot of other countries have election days on Saturdays specifically for that reason, because most people are off work on Saturdays and are able to get and vote
Makes
easier
sense.
on their weekend. So kind of interesting history I was learning from somebody, because I was like, go figure, Tuesday. Yeah, so, yes, Mr. Young.
The department had a ribbon cutting ceremony for the Diamond to Dowling project. We cut the ribbon on the 7,600 minutes, so it's predominantly. A little bit of grass to grow here and there.
Is the ramp open?
It is today.
It is today?
Oh, it is, okay.
My husband will be so happy. He has a client and he goes that way, and he said, that ramp's gonna open and I'm gonna drive right past it because I'm so used to not using it anymore because it changed his travel pattern. I'll have to tell him.
So we'll be open, we'll open hard and fast on the next one, the O'Malley Diamond segment, and then also redoing the first roundabout, which was in Dowling. Pretty much complete, big project.
Did you announce last month that the hunt is open?
Yes, I did.
Okay. I wasn't here, but I got texts, actually. So I was in Africa last month, which is why I wasn't here on a trip of a lifetime. It was an amazing experience. And I was still getting texts from my mother-in-law informing me that 100th Avenue was open, and she was so excited. They live in that area, and they
About
were...
the same price, too.
Yeah. Yeah, so...
Our change orders on that one are a little bit high.
Any other committee comments?